everyone, welcome back to another episode of Daisy Diaries. I'm excited for this one because today I'm going to be talking about 4 of the biggest lessons I've learned since starting my business. If you don't know, I started my business at the age of 21, so let me tell you, there are a lot of things I have learned along the way, and I just feel like a little episode like this might be helpful for anyone getting started. So some of the subjects I'm going to touch on today is when to make your first hire. We're also going to touch on trademarking, domains, VAT numbers, which is a whole thing in itself. I'm not an expert, but I'm going to tell you some of the mistakes I made. And then also about product development. So a few bits I'm going to touch on. I'm actually a bit inspired to do this because I've just taken on a mentor, which is very new for me. I don't know if you know that, Sharon.
No!
Just taken on a mentor. I have a mentor for me, and I've just found it such an amazing process. And someone reached out to me. She's still in 6th form and is starting her own business, and it's just been such a lovely experience.
You're a mentor.
I'm mentoring her, yeah.
I'm gonna cry.
And obviously, like, I'm no expert, but for someone very like early in their journey, there's still bits that I can hopefully give to help. So she's been coming into the office once every couple of weeks. We're doing her like roadmap. Anyway, it's just kind of inspired me that maybe there is some little bites of information that I can give people to hopefully help them on their journey as well. So that is going to be today's episode. So it's going to be an exciting one. And I'm also going to be putting some makeup on my face because if you thought I was going to film this whole video barefaced, you were very wrong. So let's get into it. The first topic we're going to talk about is essentially trademarking, but ultimately brand and branding. Something I was very aware of from a very, very early stage within Glow for Its journey was the fact I wanted to have a very clear and distinct brand identity. So if you don't know already, when I actually started the business, Glow for It, as it's known now, was in fact called Glow for It Girl. The whole essence of Glow for It Girl was that we were inspiring predominantly women to go natural, to embrace their natural beauty and to feel confident with that glow. So the essence of what the brand was is still there today. We've obviously tweaked it to make sure it's ultimately more inclusive of the community that we want to represent and that we do represent. So fun fact, when I first started the business, this is ethereal glow stick, by the way, everything was called Glow for It Girl. So our web domain was Glow for It Girl, my email accounts, all of our sign-offs were Glow for It Girl, our social handles were Glow for It Girl, and it was that way for probably about a year. We had our Glow Girls, which was our kind of community of influencers, creators, and community members who were tagging us in content. And then about a year in, it just started to feel really uncomfortable to me, the fact that we were really, really symbolizing consistently this female audience when actually we had a really, really prominent, diverse audience and community base. So I then made the decision to change the entire business from Glow for It Girl to Glow for It. And it was actually at this time that I started brainstorming lots of other business names, and thank God I stuck with just Glow for It, because actually looking back, some of them were a little bit wild. And I was quite tempted at that point to go down kind of the Glow Lash route. And it was one of my kind of proposed names was like Glow Lash, something along that line, to really emphasize obviously our hero SKU. But I'm so glad now that I didn't do that, because I really think that would have closed us off to a very niche audience. And as you know, we've kind of really developed our range from that point. Ultimately, what I'm telling you today is that kind of decision does come with a lot of additional points. So one being trademark, domains, IP, you name it, everything is kind of tied to your company name. So at that point, we still hadn't hit the threshold to be fully VAT registered, etc. So this was very, very early on in our business days, but that means your company's house has to change to your registered business name. All of that has to change. And most importantly, and it's a mistake I see people make really, really consistently early in their journey, is trademarking. It sounds very basic and lots of people will know this already. If you haven't trademarked your business name as a kind of property, you have no ownership of that. So if someone else has that same trademark, owns the trademark, they can send you a cease and desist, they can shut down your company because you're using what is their property in terms of a term. So really, really important. From the start, we trademarked Glow For It in the UK and also in the EU to give us that opportunity to kind of branch out. It's an expensive process, but it's really, really important to do early on, because it can also mean if you do get into a position where you have this trademark debacle going on, you could have to retreat, you could have to change the copy on all of your product packaging, etc. It's a really expensive process. So trademarking early on is really, really important. Another thing is registering your domain. So making sure that someone else doesn't have your domain. For example, if I typed in glowforit.com, we own that. But if I did that with another brand that I wanted to start and it was already owned by someone else, you might want to rethink, one, what the name of your brand is going to be, because it can cause some confusion within the industry, but also it can be very, very expensive. So if you're trying to buy a domain from someone, you could be talking, £100,000. Like, they're really, really expensive processes. And fun fact, the reason I'm telling you this, basically when I started Glow For It was taken. So we had a web domain of Glow For It shop. Now, at the time, the web domain for Glow For It was like £10,000 and I did not have the money. And in recent years, we've actually gone on to buy the web domain of Glow For It, just because obviously they can increase that in price as it becomes more valuable, to the point that I think it had actually gone up to about £20,000. But we have bought it now. We're on a payment plan to pay it off monthly. But we have bought that now because it just protects the brand in the long term. And if we come to sell one day and we don't own that web domain, that would not look good to a potential buyer or an investor down the line. So anyway, really, really important to make sure that you own IP, domain, you've trademarked, and check the social handles as well. It's an easy kind of first step. If you search Glow Lash, for example, that might be taken and those social handles might be taken. And that's the same for TikTok. We had to be Glow For It shop, didn't we? Mm-hmm. So there you go. Got to be creative. First top tips is making sure that you've kind of covered all of those from the very, very early stages to save you having to kind of backtrack further down the line, because it can be expensive and timely. Section number 2 is on when to make your first hire. This is a really interesting topic, because I would say for a long time I was doing everything myself. And that actually really isn't a bad thing. I think I really valued that time to learn so much about the business, so much about where my strengths lay. I think it's really important to lean into where those strengths lie. For me, I could spend, and I was at the time, spending one full day a week doing our P&L, because it would take me an entire day to try and pull these figures together and understand them. I'd do it every Wednesday and I'd sit down doing our P&L, which is our profit and loss document. And it would take me a full day to kind of pull these data facts together and try and understand them, where actually that could take someone else, e.g. a bookkeeper, a couple of hours. Anyway, to answer the question when to know to make your first hire, for me, I sat down one day and looked at the business and thought, okay, what is taking up 90% of my capacity at the moment? And at the time, probably a good half of my day was spent doing customer service. Now that spanned from answering emails, obviously, but also to DMs, answering comments on our social posts. All of that was taking me like a large majority of my time. So actually the first hire I made, not because I didn't enjoy the customer service, I actually carried on doing it probably for far too long. And I remember a point where one of my partner's friends was like to me, "You're still answering your emails." And I was like, yeah, I kind of love it, because I get to see all the before and afters come in and then I can sort people's problems. And he literally said to me, like, "Daisy, do you think this is the best use of your time?" And then I was like, well, maybe not actually, because I could be working on the business rather than in the business, which is obviously a really common phrase, but it is super important. I could be thinking big picture when I was answering Sally's questions about how often to apply the lash serum. So first hire for me was someone in customer service. And the real reason for that was just because it freed up so much more of my time. The second hire I did was actually in fulfillment. So at this time, it was still really early in my journey and I was packaging all the orders myself. And what I did, because I wasn't at the stage and I wasn't ready to move to a full 3PL, which is basically a fulfillment center where they will process all of your orders for you from start to finish. I wasn't at the point where I was ready to kind of move to a full fulfillment center. So again, I was doing this myself from my parents' kitchen. What I did was I hired a family friend, and this family friend would come over for a few hours every single day, and she would package up the orders for me. And again, that gave me back a good few hours of my day to get on with other aspects of the business while she was packaging that up. For me at the time, it was obviously lower cost, but it was also lower risk. I still had full control over how the orders were being processed, how they were being shipped out. So yeah, those for me were the two key first hires. And the main reason for that was because it gave me those hours back in the day. And I was then able to really focus on, okay, how can I grow and drive this business forward? And actually one of the key things I spent my time doing was filming more content. At that time in the business, I was the only content creator. So I was producing so much content, but that was the element within the business that I could see instant impact. The more content I posted, the more viral we would go, the more sales we would make. And it was just that constant cycle of churn that actually me investing more time into that aspect that was giving us revenue, e.g. the cash flow to push the business forward, was more valuable than me spending the majority of my time in the back end. The next section, what we're going to talk about, how I'm going to phrase it, is those one-way door and two-way door decisions. So if you're not familiar with them, basically a one-way door decision is, e.g. calling ourselves Glow For It, rebranding to Glow For It. Yes, of course, we could retreat on that, but it's a really strong, bold decision that needs to take time and have a considered kind of moment to make sure you're making the right choice. So that would be a one-way door decision because you're going through that door and you really don't, unless it's vital, want to have to come back through. The two-way door decisions are kind of those day-to-day decisions you have to make within a business that you could kind of retreat on, you could change and pivot. Early on, what really is important is those one-way door decisions. And an example of that is who you decide to partner with for your manufacturing. So at the end of the day, I truly do believe that any brand is only as good as its product, and the product has to be brilliant if you want to have sustained loyal customer base and growth within the brand, because you might be able to convince someone to purchase your product once through really strong marketing and social activations, but I can guarantee they won't be purchasing that again if the product isn't up to scratch. So spending time in the early stages, making sure your product is as strong as it can possibly be, is really vital. And one of the mistakes I made early on was not partnering with the right supplier. So now we're going to go into a little bit of the journey in actually reformulating and relaunching our hero SKUs. Now, this was always, to be honest, a goal and ambition of mine. I always knew that I wanted the products to be made and formulated here in the UK. Basically, the MOQs, which is minimum order quantity, in the UK is a lot higher. So for example, over in Asia, you might be able to have an MOQ of 500 units. Here in the UK, it's typical that you'd have about 10,000 units as your MOQ. So as a starting point for a brand owner, that is very expensive. When you're placing your PO, you pay typically 50% upfront. So for math's sake, I'm not saying these are our figures, if our lash serum cost £5 to produce here in the UK and we needed to do a run of 10,000 minimum order quantity, that would mean the overall PO cost of that production run would be 50,000. Purchase order is the PO. So when you're placing your purchase order, would be £50,000, and I would need to pay a 50% deposit. So £25,000 I would have to pay upfront, and I'd have to pay the additional £25,000 once that purchase order had been fulfilled in my warehouse. Can we just take a moment to appreciate? I did not have £50,000, okay? So obviously I'm using random figures there, but essentially when I started the business, I had the remainder of my student loan, which was about £500,000. And then to place my initial purchase order, I had to loan some money from my mum. And in order to do that, I had to show her an entire business plan, show her my projection of sales, all of that sort of stuff. Basically, who you partner with in the early days is really, really important. I wasn't able to initially go with my dream partner here in the UK because I needed to build some cash flow first. But one problem you have when your products aren't produced, let's say locally, or with a supplier that you really, really trust, is that you can easily lose control on that process of formulation, development, quantity, quality. And that's something I learned really early on. So I felt very out of control with the supplier we were with. We often had lots of issues with import and delays and things being held at customs, which would affect me being able to fill my orders on time. And it kind of became a real whirlwind of, okay, this is exactly how I don't want my relationships with my suppliers to work. In the meantime, I was working with our UK supplier to develop and formulate our now Glow for It serum. But that was a long process. And essentially the reason I did that entire journey, one, was so that I could be really, really proud of how and where our products were being made. It aligned perfectly with kind of my goals ethically as a brand to make sure we were being really conscious about the ingredients we were using, how they were being sourced, and at the same time to ensure I was giving our customers the best and highest quality product possible. One of those one-way door decisions I made was reformulating, relaunching our hero SKU, but part of that was making sure I had a really, really genuine and authentic relationship with my supplier, because at the end of the day, your product is everything, and if there is issues with your supply chain, that is going to, at the end of the day, affect your customer. Another decision we made was to expand our product range. This was always the plan for me. We come in with this really incredible hero SKU, but I really wanted to diversify away from just being seen as a lash serum brand. So as you know, we launched a brow serum, a hair serum. I then removed all of our other products that were on the line at the time, including our blush sticks, our mascara, reformulated everything so that it was aligned with our core values. So as you'll notice, we have since relaunched our mascara back and better than ever with this incredible formulation made in Italy. The blush sticks, they'll probably already be out by the time you see this video. Again, that was a formulation that I pulled from production. I wasn't happy with the supply chain we were experiencing in Asia, so we relaunched it. And honestly, the formula is just next level now that it's made in Italy, and I'm going to put it on right now so you can see. So yeah, that was one of my big decisions, was expanding the product range. And with an expanding product range and growing business comes the need to hire more people. And that was another really big lesson I learned. At the start, I was really quite cautious or worried of hiring it sounds stupid, but anyone with too much experience, because I just felt, as still a 26-year-old business owner, that I was constantly just going to be found out for the fact that I didn't know what I'm doing. And I think, all of us have a little bit of that, but especially if you're a younger founder, it's so easy to feel like I'm literally going to be caught out in this massive lie that, this business has grown, and someone coming in with a host of experience will be like, you don't really know what you're doing here. I will now say, through the lens of experience, having now hired people with a wealth of experience, they bring so much value to your team and also to me as a founder. And I don't always believe that that comes with age at all. Also, I think you can be incredibly senior in terms of experience, even if you are younger. But we basically had a very junior team. For a lot of people, it was their first job, their first kind of corporate style role. And we were all growing and learning and going through the motions together. Whereas now we're bringing in people with years of experience, and there's so much value that can add to the team. So I just think, as a little side note, any founders out there, because I was one of them who was scared of hiring anyone older than me, because I thought, why the hell would they want to report into me? How could I set them KPIs, etc.? Don't be afraid to do that, because you're only kind of putting a boundary or a barricade around your business. Final thing we're going to touch on today is the numbers. Now, I am in no way a specialist in the numbers, so if we want a full episode on this, let me know, because I would be more than happy to bring in someone who is a lot more specialized specialised in this subject, but I can talk about my personal experience because let me tell you, it was a journey when it comes to the numbers. If you don't know already, I am extremely dyslexic. I cannot spell or read really to save my life, which Sharon knows for a fact. She'll give me a script and I'm like, I cannot see these words and numbers all together jumbled up. But numbers also aren't my strong suit. But I really had to get to grips with them in the early stages of the business. And I would really recommend anyone at home not to ignore that side of your business in the early stages, because your business literally will crumble if you don't have a grasp on the numbers. Most importantly is your margins. And I'm going to talk about this again from a perspective of someone who is not an expert, but going through the experience myself. Your margins are going to be everything. And by margins, what I mean is your product costs you X to make, you sell it for X. The space in between is your margin, what you're going to be taking home. But also I'm going to caveat that with an example. Let's say, for example, we'll stick to the same numbers. Our lash serum cost me £5 to make. It then costs me an extra £3.50 to ship that product, package it and deliver it to a customer. We're now £8.50. I'm selling that for £30. You then also have to pay VAT on that. So 20% of that product cost, that £30, is going to the tax man. And then also on top of that, if you decide to do any paid media, that will lower your margin as well. Then if you decide to run any discounts, your margin's getting slimmer and slimmer. Basically what I'm saying is you don't start with a strong margin, e.g. what your cost price is, regardless of everything else and what you're selling your product for. You're giving yourself a slimmer and slimmer gap to actually make a profit from those sales. And in the early stages, that profit is exactly what you need to reinvest into your business. So it was only through those profits that we were making in the early days that we could build up a cash flow to reinvest into the business, to be able to grow our product range, to hire people. So that profit and that margin is really important. So I think having a little breakdown into that, and equally, if your margin isn't strong enough, it might just mean that you need to charge a bit more for your product. And I know that's a scary thing because we're in a cost of living crisis. People are more conscious about what they're spending, but you need to market and showcase that that product has true value to be able to price it at a higher point. Anyway, basically make sure that that margin is as strong as possible, and also really get to grips early on with VAT, tax. It's not exciting, it's boring, I actually hate it, but you have to have an understanding of that, otherwise you're going to be in real trouble. I was stung quite early on because I wasn't being given the right advice, because I wasn't working with an accountant who was specialised in e-commerce and online sales and TikTok shop. That was a whole new area. I would essentially just make sure the advice that you're getting, if you're not specialised in this area, because I definitely wasn't, is coming from the right places, because it can leave you in a really tricky position. And other thing I'm going to say, and I try and emphasise this to the team, because the team sometimes, and I think external people can see your overall revenue as a business and think, oh my God, wow, smashing it. But as you grow and scale, your overheads just increase and increase and increase. So obviously, the more products we sell, the more VAT we pay. The more team members we hire, the higher the salary wages at the end of the month for the team as a total. Equally, the bigger space we need. So we've just moved into a bigger office to facilitate the growing number of people we have. All of these are expenses that just build into your overheads. So it's cliche, but revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity. And it's really important, because you can get fixated on that revenue number, but your overheads just increase and increase, your margins get smaller, and actually that profit value gets smaller and smaller as well. So yeah, just to be really clear on differentiating between those two things from an early stage, and fixate on that profit and make sure that your product and your cost of goods and your process of selling is as profitable as possible, because that cash flow is going to be everything to you in the early days. We're basically finished, so I'm just going to talk you through what I've used. That is a little bit of the Vive lip liner in Brat. Got that the weekend as well. Really big fan of that. And I also picked up from Sephora the Vive Bounce Balm. I see Jamie using this a lot and I'm a big fan, and really gorgeous product. It's really lovely. I'm gonna finish off with a little bit of powder. The mirror, guys, if you like the look of that mirror, let me know, because it's actually at the moment a little sample from Meg, who runs our operations and MPD, which is new product development. Very important from Sharon that I give you because I actually do agree with that, because so many people that I've spoken to, especially in my early days, would use all of these anagrams of like acronyms. All of these acronyms for business terms, and I'd be like, not a clue what they're saying. So cute little mirror that we're thinking of doing as a little gift for purchase for people, especially with our mascara, because then you can pop your mascara on the train and things like that. That is the end of this episode. I really hope some of you found that useful. I know it's quite a niche, but I just think we've got a bit of a following on here of people who are inspired to maybe start something on their own, maybe have and feel a little bit lost. If there were any topics that I covered today that you think actually I'd love a little bit more of a deep dive, again, I'm no expert, but I can either get people in the room so that we can chat to them directly, or I can touch on my personal story and experience in a little bit more detail. Any of those four that you want a little bit more insight into, let us know in the comments. If you're enjoying these Daisy Diaries, let us know, because it's quite different to the other bits of content we post on other channels. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and follow us on @Plowfoot Shop across socials. Hope you enjoyed, and we will be back soon with another Daisy Diaries.